Yeah, so as it was mentioned, oh, please work. Yay. I'm doing on pixel tokens and prompts, indeed, for design systems, like how did it all start with design systems, where are we now, and what's the next step, basically. Kind of like the evolution of design systems. So for today, we'll go a little bit into the history of it. We'll take a look at component shelf, style guides, and what are actual design systems, how tokens, how they enter the space, and what can we do with them. How the governance works when everything has to be now systemized and synchronized with each other, and where do prompts and AI come into the picture here. And how do you then feed all of the previous things into your AI so that you don't get generic slop, but that you actually get controlled output that you need. I will not go deeply into code. I will just show how to run certain instruction files, but if you want to really go deep into code, catch me outside. How about that? And then we'll we'll have a little talk over there. We'll go as far as I know and as far as I can help you there. And otherwise, I'll give you enough documentation to find all the information you need. So a little bit about myself. Drazen Jankovic, I'm 41 years old. I'm a cosplayer and a gamer. The picture on the right is my first Frontmania conference. I've been here basically as long as most of these chairs, because I've been presenting at every single one of these events. I play disc golf in my free time, and I've been a full stack engineer for like the last 22 years, maybe a little bit more. I'm an accessibility specialist. That's also my main focus. So please go to the YouTube of Frontmania and check out my other talks about it. They're really nice. You might need glasses with red and blue lenses, but it's fine. You'll figure it out. The delay between the two screens is amazing. There we go. Let's rewind a little bit. Back when we were thinking of style guides and when they started, most people think like, probably in the 80s with Apple, or maybe in the 90s when Microsoft also joined the party. But the actual first style guide started back in 1960 by the designer Paul Rand, and he introduced the 13 lines for IBM in the IBM design program. And this was the really big switch from how style guides and patterns were done before, and now for the first time we actually had something that could be treated as a scalable system, and it could be governed, unlike in the past. So what the guy did was it established strict visual standards, things like logo, type. Why do they need 13 lines in some of the IBM logos, and in others it can be blank, things like that. That was all done by him for the first time. It wasn't a digital design system because there was no digital thing really happening, but it's the first thing that we have that comes close to what we know as style guides nowadays. If we jump a bit more into the future, fast forwarding to 1978 when it started and 1987 when it finished, so it took him almost 9 years. Bruce, and his last name is annoying to pronounce, Tognazini, or just Tog as he likes to refer to himself, he started releasing the first of 8 editions of the Apple Human Interface Guidelines. And this is the first time where we actually had style guide combined with component guides, where not only did we have how should the branding look, but also how should this all behave? How should Windows act? How should button act? So it was the first interaction guide that we got. It provided, like I said, more rules, not just for visual consistency, but also interaction behaviors and UI components. And it got released with the Macintosh 2. A bit of fun trivia for him. His legacy is basically he's one of the forefathers of how graphic user interfacing design is done now. It influenced nearly every single design system that you see out there in current day. The guidelines are still managed, so if you want to read them, you can look them up. Probably if you're developing or designing for iOS, then you already have looked into it. And a little fun fact about him is that a lot of the UX terms that we know, he's the one that coined them. So forgiving interfaces, interface metaphors, and so on. Then we jump a little bit into the future from 1987, and you get like the actual emergence of the web. You start getting standards with HTML, making a website with just HTML, nothing else. There was no styling. If you wanted to style, you had to change the property of the HTML itself. Luckily, that got made a little bit easier. CSS got introduced in 1994 as one of the first standards. It separated content, it separated presentation from the content itself, so you could style separately from the elements. And then 2000 to 2005, no longer did you have to do things in tables. I don't know, who here has developed before the year 2010? Fairly few. So for all you young people, if we wanted to center a div, you would first have to go to the web standards and make what a div is, because it did not exist. You had to use tables to center all your content. So if you had like a nice looking website, it was basically tables nested inside each other to be able to center, move things around and everything. In 2006 to 2010, JavaScript frameworks really started rising, from jQuery, prototype, MooTools, all the way up to what we now have for most of the things. Something else happened in July 1995, just in the middle of those things. GeoCities launched Times Square and Tokyo servers. These were dedicated to anime, gaming, and so on. And a young developer made his impact on the world. That was basically me. I made my first website. I know, right? Ego. This was my first website, and surprisingly, it still runs. There's an archiving project for GeoCities, and my website got, yeah, I know, this was an actual pop-up that I had on my website to confirm that you want to enter my website. If you're a UXer, please close your eyes, because this is my website. What you might see is that to enter the website, you can choose between, do you want a good experience with Netscape or an even better experience with Internet Explorer? The reason for this is we had no JavaScript. You had to use Java applets to do certain things like animation. So you had to develop in Java for your website fully and then run a full Java applet on the front end. So Netscape did not want to do that. They blocked Java applets very fast. Internet Explorer didn't, so you had to choose. Also, this website is best viewed in 640 by 480. I was very modern in 1995. I did not have a 320 240 screen, so I was super happy. So yeah, super proud. One of the major fucking updates this Saturday is I found a new way of putting MPEG files on the web. So I uploaded a bunch of videos of Dragon Ball Z, and they were super big, 15 megabyte. I know. Like, the average iPhone now makes a JPEG that's bigger than that. So, but that was modern at the time. Now I need to exit that, so I can go back here. By the way, the presentation is fully available online later, so you can please do a code review on my website. Lucky in 2006, a man by the name of Bill Scott came into play. He designed the first really big pattern library, the Yahoo Design Pattern Library. This man has so many things on his resume. I tried to shorten it, and it still ended up being 4 slides. So please just look up his name and see what kind of impact he had on UX, on front end, on even some back end development. But basically, his view was, instead of building components isolated from the rest of the teams, why not consolidate them, have like one team make the components and deliver them to the rest. This way you would have consistency, you would have guidance, and you would have some harmony in there. So he formalized some web UI patterns, he made design patterns, and this was the big one. He made them discoverable, teachable, and reusable. Everybody in Yahoo No matter whether you were working on Yahoo Finance, Yahoo Travel, or whatever, you could go into the developer network, find the information you need, and design the site in the same way that other teams have done. So this was like one of the big first steps in influencing the future systems for how you do documentation, how do you share, how do you go further. And again, like this guy's resume is amazing. In 2011, I think almost everybody here has used Bootstrap before, either from version 0.1 to version 5, I believe is out now. Developed by Mark Otto and Jacob Thornton, a developer and a designer at Twitter at the time, which is how they look. You would expect that the designer is on the right. No, they're actually switched. I was very surprised, like my stereotyping went out of the door there. But their main thing was, from a design perspective, they wanted to create a consistent internal UI framework, easy to share, easy to use. And from a developer perspective, they wanted to focus on modularity and scalability. How can you go from a simple one little interface all the way to a full page, like be able to scale it fully. And they popularized, they made design accessible to developers, first of all, but also they popularized component-based thinking and grid systems. This fully killed off how people were designing at first with tables and divs and went into a full-on grid system. And then came 2014 and 15, one of the biggest moments in design system history. Basically, at two different companies. At Google, we had Matias Duarte working on material design, started up the project. And on the other hand, we had Gina Ann working for Salesforce, working on the Lightning design system. And the big thing that came from these two, and we'll go later into it a bit, is they started introducing tokens, components, governance, principles, and documentation that was no longer just, oh, well, here's the README file for this component. No, every time you make a change, that document changed along with it. So it really made living documents and living systems. And we'll get to her specifically back in a moment. But first, I said a few words like component shelves, style guides, and systems. In the early days of digital design, basically, you had a component shelf. It's like, here's all my UI elements, use them. There was no, like I said, you could go and download jQuery and just use whatever component you want inside whatever other component you want. You could put a drop-down inside a button because there was no guidelines, there was no guidance or governance to prevent you from doing these things. So the component shelf was basically a collection of UI elements, no structure, no standards, or actually any usage guidance. Style guides tried to add that, but they were mostly focused on design, where they would define what legal and branding would give to the designers, like, hey, this is our brand color, this is some of the interaction we have, and that's about it. But it did not go fully into implementation. And even interaction was very minimal in what they provided in style guides. You would often get, as a developer, you would get a PDF, and it's like, here you go. So it was really annoying when you get like just an image in a PDF, and it's like, this is how the login screen should look like. And there's no mentions of 16 pixels from there, 20 from there, and so on. You would just have to constantly talk with your designers. And if they were not available, we've seen websites in the past, they looked horrible because depending on what team made something, they were like, well, we saw that as 16 pixels, but you saw it as 24 because you counted these 4 padding pixels here. It's like, yeah, things like that. And that's where design systems came in and really took those two from before, combined them into one thing. It became a living ecosystem which combined design tokens for your scale and consistency with your coded components for reuse and testing, added documentation for not just context, but also content, and added governance for improving quality and also holding people accountable. If you did something wrong, who do you talk to fix it? Basically, each level adds more clarity and consistency and scalability. And you've probably heard this a lot about design systems. It's like a Lego box. You have your guidelines, which are your manuals. You have your bricks, which are the components, and so on. It, unfortunately, is one of the best metaphors for it, because it is like that. In a quick glance, all of the differences between all of these things, just go later to the document, to the slide, and you can see them, or take a picture, whichever one you want. But basically, the purpose of component shelves was, I just want to have reusable elements. That's about it. It had some things like buttons, inputs, modals, so on, but nothing really much. It had no rules. Updating, it was just like in code. It rarely updated once you had the tools, because I believe jQuery, for instance, which was used often, I think there's still websites running jQuery 1.23 because it was one of the most popular ones at the time. They don't often change. If it works, it works. That was the mentality. Meanwhile, style guides were going on a different approach where it was like, okay, we have to stay consistent. We have to keep updating, but not as much as code did. And design systems were like, no, every single step needs to be taken seriously, needs to stay up to date, needs to stay alive to continue into the future. The main difference is also who was it used by. Component shelf were your developers, style guides were almost always your designers, but with the design system, you're looking at the entire team. So not just designers and developers, you're also looking at your QA, you're looking at your PMs, right, Dennis?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you, Dennis. And later on, even AI agents, and I'll show you in a bit how you can add those as well to your living documents. There we go. So the big change that happened was tokens started entering. Designers started joining what developers were already doing. Object-oriented programming was introduced through tokens to Figma, which was a very new concept for a lot of designers thinking in such ways, like how do you break things up? First of all, quick definition, design tokens are just named reusable variables, whether you're using Figma or Sketch or whatever, if it has it, general name is just a token. It's platform agnostic, so it doesn't matter whether whether you're developing for an Android or iOS or for the web. If it's called background, it's the background. It should be clear on that. And the best thing about tokens is you can, if you export your tokens from, let's say, Figma, you can export it as a JSON, which is a machine-readable format, so you can use that to teach your AI. What tokens do I have available? What can I use in my designs? So what started as, for developers, sus variables and CSS variables became tokens in things like Figma and Sketch, and now both of those you can use to teach your AI. Little example, if you have like your global token is ping 600, you can create that, but if you have a deviation, you can then continue. So it's like all variable controlled. So no more hard coding, please. It originated in the late 2010s, and as I said before, the concept of design tokens was introduced and formalized by Salesforce. It was actually Ginny Ann that we saw before. She's the one that made this. She's the first person who started talking about a system for designers that they could easily talk with developers on the same subject. So she introduced this for the first time, end of 2014, just before the release of Google Material Design in their Lightning design system. At that time, Salesforce started making LDS. So that's why those two were very big, important points. One is on how you document everything, and the other one was adding new technology for both designers and developers to use. So why were they needed? Well, before tokens, values like colors and spacing were hard-coded in CSS or design tools, manually synced between dev and design, and prone to drift and duplication. I would get your CSS file, make something for you, go to another team, make something there, but they changed how they call that variable, but they're linking to the same color. So you would have light green in one team and green in the other, but they were the same color. So that's where that drift and duplication could happen, especially if you then started on enterprise level, started combining all of the CSS files to just generate as one single system. You would get like 5 different ways of calling the same color green on a global level. What Salesforce did want was a single source of truth for UI styles. They wanted platform agnostic. It didn't matter whether you were using React, iOS, or Android. Color should be color, text should be text, and so on. And they wanted to be able to scale brand consistency. It doesn't matter whether you're working in a small team or a big team, you should be able to do it. And that's what tokens solve for them. Who uses tokens nowadays? Everybody. Like every single design system out there at the moment uses it in some way or capacity. Material design came in 2022. That's when they added tokens, so since then you can use it there. But depending on what framework you're using, tokens are already there. The main thing that was really important was the introduction of Style Dictionary. This allowed your Figma to connect with Style Dictionary, to connect to your Azure or your GitHub. So whenever a designer changed something, Style Dictionary would pick it up and do a new pull request to your repos to provide a new CSS file for it. So this way, a designer wasn't fully dependent on you and you weren't fully dependent on a designer. I would say still do like a good code review. You never know what sometimes gets sent as a token. Today's ecosystems, they're not just used for color and spacing. We're looking at motion, durations, things like that. We're looking at elevation, whether something does it have a shadow or should it be on a different Z index, things like that. Typography, border radius, layout logic, language direction, all of those things you could manage by your tokens and then output them directly as either SAS or CSS to your repos, shortening the line between design and development even more. Light and dark theming is something that's very often used through tokens. Accessibility is used through tokens, cross-platform UI, and at this point, AI design generation. If you're using Figma and you made tokens, Figma is actually training their AI on the tokens you made, unless you opted out in the options. How does that look in principle? Well, basically, if this is your Figma, it will output a JSON file saying, hey, this is my color primary, these are my fonts, and so on. For a designer, they see brand and layout. A developer will see the variables they need. And for AI, that's a very nice pattern. If it can recognize what is a color, what is a font, what is a spacing, and so on, it can learn other things that are needed. And then comes the big one, governance. You have a lot of these systems that are connected to each other. They're shared between teams, and then of course somebody will go like, but who owns all of this? What if I change something? Does it immediately get approved because I'm the senior in the team, or does it still have to go through approval process? What if I, as a developer, say that a token should be red instead of blue, like the designer said? Should that token then be sent back? So governance is then often seen as like a scary word, like something heavy and slow, more bureaucracy being added, but it doesn't have to be. In a new design system, your governance is your structure created by all of the other previous parts. It should not cause your bottlenecks to happen. Like if you set up everything correctly, if you're using an out-of-the-box system, it's even easier, but if you set up everything manually, it should not be your bottleneck. It should actually be helping your teams to develop faster and your designers to be more consistent with their designs. In the past, what you would get was like a long checklist of every item you had to go through just to change a single color, for instance. Tokens and components started embedding your rules directly into your tools. So that part of governance is taken care of by that. If you're using a button, then you should be using a button. You should be using a button in the same way. If you say, well, I want to deviate, then that's reasons to go to the rest of the team and say like, hey, I need to deviate because of these things. Can we update either the token or can we update the embedded rules in the component? You should not just deviate from it whenever you want, which was possible in component shelves. You could always deviate. Versioning, documentation, and tooling. Probably you heard this from your product managers a lot, like, where's the documentation? I certainly did from the two here. So yeah, and it would allow you to add a lot of analytics and usage trackage. Keeping your system healthy. You could check when certain components are used, whether are they even updated often, how often are they used, is design actually ever looking at those components, like if they made like a certain progress bar, is that progress bar actually in any of the designs? You could all track that through all of these systems. The big thing is, of course, trust, inclusivity, and brand integrity. Everybody has to be included in this process. You have to trust the process as well. And branding usually will follow, even though sometimes they will be like, but you're using 2 pixels. We want 1.5 pixel. It's like, I don't know how to do a half of a pixel. So sometimes you will have to worry there a bit. So now, what you actually came for, instead of just a history lesson. 2 slides and then I'm done, so no. What if designs weren't just something you created by clicking? Like you heard this before, like in Figma, I can type in, create a checkout flow with 2 buttons and a progress stepper. What if that could also be done in code? Well, you could do that. Copilot has it, Windsurf has it. In Figma, the Figma AI has it. The problem is it generates whatever it knows as default for online. It will find how every other team has done buttons because that's what it's trained on. But that's not how we do buttons. That's not how we do a login screen. So this is where generating your AI by preparing prompts as a new interface layer and designing, wow, did I skip a whole extra? Yeah, cool. Creating powerful structures that they can follow. Structures from your own code, structures from your own design, structures from your own documentation. If the AI can see it, it can start coding as one of you. It can start designing as one of you. And you just have to train it. That's the main thing. You have to train it, and that's going to take either a long time or it's going to create a lot of output that you don't like, which immediately brings it to, if we do this as an example, generate a mobile onboarding screen with a progress bar, dark mode support, and accessible text, often you'll get something like this. Does it match? Sorta, but dark mode is missing. There's still things that are missing there, so you really have to be very clear on what you're doing. You hope that it will at least use your tokens for a color background token, that it will pull the stepper from your component library to create the stepper, and that it will follow any other accessibility rules or sizing rules like spacing, scaling, and so on. And that it will apply everything also for mobile, because we asked for a mobile size. Now I hear the designers in the audience going like, hell no. And from developer point of view, I myself have been, for the last few months, have been fixing a lot of vibe coding that people have been doing. It can go very bad if you don't do it correctly. And I really want to iterate something really big, and that is prompts do not replace people. At least not at this moment, and I hope never, because I believe creativity is part of a human process, so we should always be involved. But as a designer, as a developer, there's no way that a prompt at the moment will replace you. Even if you have a perfectly trained AI, perfectly on your frameworks that you're using, they still make mistakes. Because they're fed the wrong information. You need to feed it the correct way to at least train it somewhat nearly to yourself. So feeding the AI, you should imagine it as onboarding a new junior developer. You need to give them where your repos are. You need to give them your folder structure, explain the folder structure to them, talk through your naming conventions, and point them to the component examples, like this is where our storybook is, this is how you use it, this is how you change variables in it, and so on. You need a lot of rich, example-rich documentation. How is this one ahead from this one? Wow, amazing. Because if you don't have your rich documentation, even like simple README files, then how does the AI know what primary button means to you? Is the primary button just the main button on the page, or does it need special design attached to it as well? Does it need special interaction attached to it as well? This is where you provide these things. So whenever you create something, you need to provide just these 4 inputs here. You need a usage example. You need what the input is and how the output should be. You need to provide business rules if you have some rules for the component. Like a button will probably not have many business rules, but a login screen will. So explain those business rules to it. What naming conventions are you going to use? Your structured documentation becomes the training set for your AI teammate. And here's the thing. A lot of this, if you have a design system running now, you should have most of this already in there. It should be already in your storybook. It should be already in your README files if you have README files. If you have tests, that's your usage examples. That's your input and output, because you have those already. You can feed those to the AI. It should get the same result as your testers do. One way to do that is I'm going to use Copilot here in VS Code because that's freely available on everybody's machine. I heard there's some other things happening freely as well now, but for now, just this. This is a simple Copilot JSON. This is your instruction file for your AI on how it should do things. We are using Pascal case. Our structure is functional, hooks-based only. Do not use class components. And the libraries we want to use are React and Tailwind CSS. My file structure is by group by feature and document in JSDoc for public. I do want to, one thing about this is it's not clear if it's already up to date, yes or no, but GitHub Copilot doesn't officially support instruction files, but you can put it and it will actually read it, but it will not fully parse it unless you run an extra extension in your VS Code. But it is going here. If you use Windsurf, then it will actually read this file. I think you just have to change it from Copilot JSON to .windsurf, I believe, is the short, and then you can provide the instruction file. But Copilot is heading also there, so that's why I put this one here. You'll get 2 strategies on how to then train it with your data. One is if you have a folder with button and then a README file for the button, just tell it to read all of the README files. This is my component card summary. This is when to use it. These are my properties, and here's an example piece of code. Please create that. This is all the AI needs. The other way is comment seeding. So if you don't have README files, just put a bunch of comments in that also can explain it. For instance, instead of in the README files explaining the props, we do props, title, subtitle, optional image, optional summary. Always use semantic HTML and ARIA labels for accessibility. This is all you need to have Copilot go through it and add your design system to the knowledge it already has on generating code. If done correctly, step 1, structure your components by feature. Step 2, add everything you wish a junior developer would like to know, like how to use the component, how to create it. Keep the local context available. That's one thing that's important in VS Code and Copilot. It's looking at local context, which is what's currently open on your screen. Do I have a README file, and what file am I editing? Like what's next to it in the same folder. If you try to go into your root folder and you say, hey, in the folder source components buttons, black button with a blue border folder, I don't know, like let's go fully deep in, and you say create a new button, it will have issues because your context at the moment is the root folder, not that very specific folder. So try to keep everything inside the same structure, run commands inside the same structure, because for now, Copilot and VS Code can only see that local context. It cannot see outside. Windsurf, on the other hand, it can read out your entire folder structure and keep that as context. You can even specify deeper into it. So yeah, like I said, you can comment seed like this, or just have it read out your full test and write tests as well. So if you would provide a command like write a unit test for the card summary, based on what it read here, it should be able to generate that. And I don't like writing tests, so that's so useful. If you don't have a design system at the moment, and you're looking into it and you want to learn more about it, Daisy UI is an extension on Tailwind CSS. So if you've already used Tailwind CSS, Daisy UI just adds you some more tools. But what they have is this nifty little file. And it's actually a good file to use as a base for how could you create your own training. So you can tell Copilot, fetch this file, and it has everything in, when to use it. You see it here at the top. What is this file? Where can I find the rest of the documentation? How do I install Daisy? What are the usage rules? What are the components I have? Like, do they have parts, styles, behaviors, colors, size, and so on? So this file, I really like for using as a base for my own things that I'm developing on. And especially if you're working in Tailwind, then this one is like, you can almost copy paste it and change your own variables to how you need. But it has everything explained. If we go to one of the components, like these are the rules for how to use. So for instance, this is the rules for the accordion. Accordion is used showing and hiding content, but only one item can stay open at a time. So it will then provide what class names there are, the HTML syntax, and rules for any of the modifiers. So it's really useful to see just as an example for how you could I should really follow my mouse. It's a really good way of how can you structure your documentation and follow on further on it. So with all of those things in mind, it basically comes to, let's bring it all together. We talked about the tokens, the style guides, the components, the prompts, and so on. So what you're actually looking at is no longer is your design system just for the developers, just for the designers or the PMs or whatever. You're now also adding some extra linguistics to it. You're adding a new way of doing language. Everything has to be structured. You cannot just say, well, our login screen has a button and that's it. You have to explain a little bit more, and then all of that can be used to feed your AI and make it output the code that you want, not the code that it found somewhere online. Your pixels become your letters, basically. Your tokens are your vocabulary, like speak the same thing. If I say primary, everybody should know what primary is, even the AI. Components are all of the rule sets. What modifiers can I use? When can I use these modifiers? What props can I use? When can I use the props? And so on. That's all handled by your components. And the prompt is then just basically implement all of those things to output what you need. Hello. Design systems and AI, you basically become a bilingual conversation between humans and machines. Still on time, yay. If you have any questions, we only have like a few minutes here, but I'll be outside at the SociD booth. You can catch me there, ask me anything. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. Send me questions. Like in the past, people have asked me questions over LinkedIn. I've answered every single one, so feel free. Cool. Nice. Thank you, everybody, for your input. Are there any questions now? Thank you, I love you all.
We have a few minutes, but maybe one question or two questions.
I think their main question is now, what kind of sandwiches did they put outside? Because it's lunchtime, so I'm also wondering the same thing.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you all.